I'm not going to give you exact proportions because what you're going to want to do is taste it and decide for yourself whether it has enough of the flavor you're looking for. A lot of people will tell you to reconstitute it with water, but I like vanilla. And you don't want it to be too liquid because you'll affect the texture of your buttercream. You can see all the crystals here have dissolved. Stir this in, and you just want to make sure to incorporate it so there are no little streaks of liquid. And something else that's kind of interesting about coffee buttercream is the longer, if you let it sit, the more intense the flavor gets. Nice and sweet. It tastes almost like a nice cup of hot coffee with cream and sugar in it, and that's exactly the flavor we're going for. So our coffee buttercream is all prepared. And the next thing we're going to do is our chocolate buttercream. For the chocolate buttercream, we're just going to add some melted chocolate to the buttercream and give it that nice chocolate flavor. This is unsweetened chocolate, what they also call chocolate liquor. And I'm just going to weigh out, let's look at 2 ounces and see if that looks like enough. We're just going to be putting it in indirect heat, which is the double boiler, so there's just steaming water underneath it, and that will melt it down very nicely in just a few minutes. So here we go. If you ever notice that there's water on your lid, don't put the lid back over the chocolate, otherwise you will get water in your chocolate, and you'll be one unhappy camper. So now that our chocolate is completely melted, we're going to take it off the heat and add it to our buttercream. And this is one of those instances where I like to be extra cautious. There's a lot of water that has collected on the bottom of this bowl. You just want to dry that off. I don't want to run the risk of any of it dripping into the chocolate when I pour it. We're going to add it to our buttercream. And if you'd like to have a look down in here, you see what's going to happen. Of course, it's changing the color of the buttercream. If you look, it actually almost looks like chocolate mousse. So here we go. We got that wonderful texture, and we're ready to start decorating. You excited? I am. There are a few things that you're going to need if you're going to decorate a cake. You can, at a cake decorating store, you can purchase rounds of cardboard that you use, and you really must use these to stabilize the bottom of your cake. And in between moments, you know, when you're finished with one phase of assembly and crumb coating, you have to pick the cake up and move it into the refrigerator. And this is a natural platter. I did not go to a cake decorating store. I got a box of wine, and I traced my cake pan onto it and cut out rounds so they're exactly the right size. You want to be sure you do this with clean cardboard, something new and fresh. And then, of course, the other one is raisin bran. The cake is domed up near the top here, and it can be a bit of a problem if you want your cake to be flat on top and flat on the sides. To get what you want is a perfect cylinder. So we're going to trim just a little bit of cake off the top here. Use a bread knife, and you just want to start right at the top here. You're not taking off too much. You're just trying to ameliorate this dome shape, and just turn the cake until you've cut all the way through, and then you have this little bit of cake left over. By the way, notice this turntable I've got. A lot of people don't have these at home. That's fine. You can use a Lazy Susan if you've got one. Let's have a look at cutting the cake in half sideways. This can be a little intimidating. Let the turntable do the work. You're really holding the knife still, and you're just turning the cake and just gently moving the knife in toward the center. And you're not going to make really huge sawing motions. It's kind of a subtle motion as you move through the cake. Now notice we got some crumbs on our turntable here. We're going to want to just clean those off. I've got a nice straight spatula, and I've got an offset spatula. These are both very handy for what we're going to do, and I'll show you what each one is for. Just going to want to scrape off all these crumbs because you just want to keep it clean as you go. Put this bottom layer back on the turntable, and it helps if you give it a spin because then you can see if it's off center. Like I can see it is a little lopsided. It just makes it a little easier to decorate if it's right in the middle. And we're just going to brush this syrup right onto the cake. And you'll see it. You can see how it gets absorbed right in. A bit of a fine distinction here. You want to be careful to get the cake moist, but you don't want to get it so moist that the cake will disintegrate. I just want enough to separate each of the layers. I don't want to see cake through. I don't know if you can see, there's sort of a shadow of cake. This cake was cut so that there's a dome here. You can see this on the edge like that. Now, the way that I recommend making sure that this cake is flat on top is to put this on upside down. Some people might think that this process is a little complicated, but you're basically just making a cake sandwich. You know how to make a sandwich, don't you? But what's the worst that can happen? You'll have a delicious mess. The philosophy, if you can call it that, of assembly for a cake is you want to build a cylinder. You want it to be, when you look at it from the side, it's going to look like a rectangle. It's going to be flat on the sides and flat on the top. If when you're doing this at home, if you don't have a turntable, if you don't have a Lazy Susan, it is going to be quite a bit harder. As you'll see in a moment when we're doing what's called the crumb coat on the outside, if you try to hold a cake platter or a plate and spread that icing onto it manually with your hand turning the cake, you're not going to get that nice smooth edge. So this really does make your life easy. Again, try it with a Lazy Susan if you don't have a professional turntable, but yeah, it makes it look a lot easier than it actually is. Now, this is the last layer of cake. This is the side that was down in the cake pan, so it's going to be actually nice and flat. So we're going to put, and you just want to have a look at it and decide. In fact, since it flares out a little bit, I'm going to put this downside down and middle upside up on top of the cake. And you want to give it a spin and look at it from the side. See if you've got any sections of the cake that are sticking out one way or the other.